recorded and streamed live. The recordings are published on the relevant meeting page of the Council's website. By choosing to attend the meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to be filmed and recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast for or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you've left the building, the assembly point is the High Street opposite the Guildhall. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. We'll move on to the agenda. Appointments of substitutes. Do we have any, Julian?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Matt Lamb is here for Lynn Denham this evening. Welcome,
Matt. Okay, declarations of interest. Do I see any? Councillor Hodges.
I may play council when it comes to grants, but I may not, but I'll declare it now. I'm just a council appointed representative on Play Council, but always best to declare anything.
A very wise strategy, which leads me to declare, as I'm a member of the Worcester Festival, the board appointed by this organisation. Councillor Hodgson, do you want to go too? You might want to put your mic on.
I'm a member of the Worcester Theatres Board. The
theatres, okay. And Lippard Grange, did you say?
And Lippard Grange, yes.
Ah, yeah, okay, fine. Okay, Councillor James Stanley.
Thanks, Chair. And as with Councillor Hodges, I too represent the council at Play Council.
Councillor Gregson.
I'm chair of the Elgar Festival.
Fantastic. I'm not seeing any more, so we'll move on. Public representations. Do we have any? None tonight. Thank you very much. Item 4, the minutes of our meeting that we had on the 16th of November. Would anybody like to propose those? Councillor Mackay, seconded Councillor Mitchell. Are those agreed? Agreed. Thank you. Minutes of the Income Generation Committee, to receive the minutes of the meeting of the 10th of November. Would somebody like to move that they are received? Councillor Mackay as chairman, Councillor Mitchell, yeah. Agreed? Agreed. Okay, thank you very much. We move on to item 6, the MTFS, and Mr. Flynn, I guess you're going to introduce this, are you?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, happy to. Evening, councillors. This is the next stage in our budget setting process when we start to try to draw together the outline picture for the budget. I need to stress at the outset that this is very much a draft budget at this stage. It's not an indication of where we might be when we come to February, but we're taking into account those discussions which we've had through the committees during the October-November cycle, and started a debate about and discussion about what we might want to incorporate when we get to the final stages of the process. So the primary reason for this report is to set the council tax base, which we need to do by the end of the year to allow the precepting bodies to set their own council tax bases. And secondly, just to outline the direction of travel as far as the budget is concerned. And on that, I'd just draw your attention very quickly, if I can, to a table at paragraph 5.1 on page 23, which is the overall emerging picture as far as the overall budget is concerned. So in February earlier this year, we were looking at a potential budget deficit of around 1.057 million. And because of a number of changes that have taken place, that's drifted out towards 1.7 million. So it's a worsened position, but as I say, it is a draft position at this stage. And you'll note from the first couple of lines that we undertook that voluntary redundancy exercise, which brought significant savings. So we've achieved a number of efficiencies. But there are quite a number of those were already taken into account in the budget, so they didn't reduce that deficit. And then there have been a number of changes since, which are itemised there. The key thing at the moment is a local government settlement, which we are expecting to be in the next week, although they're often late. And that, as there has been a lot of discussion, we know from the autumn announcement that there is additional money for local government, and it's a question of how it's provided. So the options that are being discussed are around it, whether new homes bonus is continued for another year. That hasn't been taken into account, and we have had quite a few new properties coming onto the council tax list this year, so that might quite be beneficial. And the lower tier services grant, which was a one-off last year, again, if government recognises that the councils at lower tier level still need that support, then we would expect some improvement from that as well. And there are also in the background a number of changes, one of which we'll talk about later on in the meeting, which should bring potential efficiencies, but we will need to re-establish an income and efficiency programme. So a big part of the work in the spring, once we've set the budget for this year, will be resetting our income and efficiency targets. We will bring information on that to members for the following year. So it's very much a steady state in terms of overall income and expenditure. We've made allowances, as you'd expect, for income reductions in a few areas and for inflation, some of which are quite significant in terms of fuel price increases and so on, but those could be relatively short-term changes. Members, rest assured that we still have sufficient reserves, and with £13 million in reserves to make sure that we can cover any deficit that we have at the year end. But that's the overall position at the moment. I believe Mark's online in case there are any detailed questions which I'm not too sure of the answer of, but otherwise I'd be happy to take any questions that members have.
Thank you, Shane. Councillor Gregson.
Can I just ask if we have any more information about the levelling up fund that I've heard so much about? The prospect of future levelling up, not where we're at the moment, but because we are anticipating opportunity.
I'm going to ask David Blake to answer that one.
We have no further information at the moment, other than I believe we're expecting a new prospectus in the new year. So I'm hoping that not too far into the spring we get a revised prospectus that sets out the terms of reference for future allocations, in terms of what we might bid for. And that will also set out a timetable for the bidding process, which will run for partway through 2022. But at the moment, I don't have any more details. No, that's it. I was just checking whether David had got any more details because he's in more regular contact with the department. But I think that's where we are.
Just so presumably then the money which we've got in the bag this year for working on that bid has not yet been touched and may not be used. But it will only be used if the application process is scheduled to finish by the end of March.
I think we may well, depending on how the discussions go with members, I think we may well start to use that money in order to tee up and plan what we want to do before we get to the point where the prospectus is issued. And I say that because we don't know what the timetable will be, and it is a £20 million allocation. And I would be concerned that if we waited until we got the allocation confirmation through, we might only be given a short time in order to put the bids together. And as members will know, it takes some time to put together a £20 million plus match funding proposal. So I would expect us to start using that money before the spring of next year, once we start to agree what we wish to proceed with in terms of projects.
Councillor Stephen and then Councillor Hodges. So Councillor Stephen.
On page 26, table 5.11, Could you go through and perhaps just walk through the difference in the earmark reserves? We're going down from 22 million to 11 million. The biggest part of that risk reserves. Can you just explain that in a little bit more detail?
Through you, Chair. Yes, as you rightly pointed out, the biggest changes in respect of risk reserves. That's because the government, we agreed a position in respect of business rates, whereby we are required to fund our preceptors. And because of the impact of COVID, which removed a significant amount of business rates income, that deficit arises on the collection fund. The government has already provided the money in respect of that. So that money is then due to be paid over in the fullness of time. So we've held it in a reserve. So basically we can't touch it. It's not something that we can retain to apply on our own activities. That is to be paid over into the collection fund at the turn of the year. So that will then automatically be written down. But that's the bulk of it. The others are primarily the range of programs that we have set out unexpected through our earmark reserves and the city plan fund. And there are a number of plan changes in respect to those. It's important, I said at the beginning, we have roughly 30 million, well, it's closer to 11 million forecast to be available at the 1st of April 2022. And it's important to recognise that the vast majority of those are allocated to certain projects. If we were to reach a point where we didn't address the ongoing revenue deficit and we started to reduce our reserves, then we would start to have to look at freeing some of those up for the purposes of continuing to remain in a solvent position. So it's worth keeping an eye on the process of those reserves over the next couple of years to make sure that we continue to have enough. But the biggest change is simply due to the business rates reserve, which is government money we've had for a specific purpose, which we must deliver. So that will go straight.
At a previous meeting, I asked a question about putting money aside for big capital budget items, things like placing refuse vehicles and other furniture like CCTV cameras. Has that now been allowed for within the planning in terms of the 4-year plan?
Through you, Chair, that continues to be allowed for. We request at this stage details of forward capital programmes. The majority of those where we do have a proper forecast going forward are in respect of refuse vehicles and the other vehicles in relation to operations. But it is something that we continue to have to work on to determine what future capital programmes look like. We tend to get forecasts for the coming year and not a great deal beyond that. Some of the big changes we're working on at the moment, the Future High Street Fund and the Towns Fund and so on, because they are major capital programmes, we are required to agree with the departments a forward funding plan. So in respect to those, which will dwarf most of our capital programme, there is a forward plan over 3 to 4 years, depending on the length of the scheme. But as for the remainder of the programme, that is still an issue. We're still talking to service managers about forward planning for capital as much as possible. I would caveat that by saying that in order for us to change and bring things into the capital programme, that requires full council reports, and therefore it's essential that we have detailed and comprehensive reports for full council consideration rather than just overall expectations. So whereas, for example, we might set aside a reserve and an expectation that we want to apply it to a particular policy area and then bring along a detailed report later. For capital items, we need the detailed reports up front. So that is part of the reason why it takes some time to bring forward those plans in quite the way that I would like, but we continue to work on that.
Thank you. Page 24, 5.2.4, under opportunities that might help to address the forecast deficit. One of those is the issue of the libraries and how we help the County Council out in providing the library service. Now, this may be just one small item in this large report, But I remember 2 or 3 years ago, this became a very big issue for the people of Worcester, and consultations were held at the various libraries, and there was a very clear feeling amongst people that they desperately wanted to retain their libraries. Because this comes under issues to address the forecast deficit, I would think that we're looking here at reducing the amount of money that we give to the county council to help with the library services. And this causes me some alarm, and I'm sure it would cause alarm to many people in Worcester who use the libraries regularly. I just wondered if there was any comment at this stage about that.
I'll give you my answer to that, Joe, which is that you know, politically, we certainly wouldn't want to see any change in the library provision in Warndon or in St John's. Obviously, in addition to that, we have at the Hive. So I don't think any proposal is likely to come forward that will put any of those at risk. So I think they can rest easy in and enjoy their Christmas books.
You're on the record now.
Well, I know I'm taking a bit of a risk, but yes, that's fine. Happy to do so. Give them some Christmas cheer. Any other questions? I just wanted to say, I mean, you know, my overall reading of our financial position is that we are in a fairly good position, given the massive impact COVID had on our financial health in the last year. The government support for that has clearly been pretty good in keeping us well stocked up with monies to meet those demands. I think we do have a requirement to restart our efficiency plan, which we've had in this council for as long as I've been here, and probably as long as any member's been here, in that sense that we've always been looking to make the council as efficient as it can be. We do at this point have a funding gap of 1.7 million next year, which we're going to be able to bridge from borrowing, not borrowing from our reserves, but we wouldn't be able to do that ad infinitum. So we do need, and I would encourage colleagues to look at in their committees, well, to recognise that, I guess, as committees debate the budget in January, but also to not only be looking at new expenditure, but looking at ways in which we can make what monies we do have go further. Which is clearly going to be important to keep the robustness of the council. I also hope that the government settlement, which is expected either this week or the beginning of the next, does actually reflect the ongoing needs of district councils. They did have a lower tier service grant last year, which was unexpected and very welcome. I hope the government recognises the good role we've played over recent years, and we get reflected that in the settlement. But yeah, I think there's still some work to be done before we obviously recommend this to council. Councillor Revs.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, just a point of note in terms of how, from an income generation perspective, I'm sure my colleague and Chair Steve will kind of agree with me on this, is obviously the impact of car park, the income of car parking has had over the last 18 months, and the volatility of that in terms of the current circumstances, and how we take that forward, and what it returned to pre-COVID levels, etc., and the volatility to that, and the fact that a huge part of our income is reliant upon that, and that it highlights the fact that we have to be even more open to new ways of income generation, not just relying on old bread and butter, so to speak. So, especially with the green agenda coming in, people working from home, electrical vehicle charging and things like that, it may just change the landscape in terms of what we've always thought as a traditional bedrock of our income. For just a recommendation for us to be more open to new ways and think more openly, and go beyond our traditional barriers.
Thank you. If there are no more comments, then can I move 1.1 to 1.4 without reading them out. Is somebody prepared to, I'll move them. Is anybody prepared to second those recommendations? Councillor Stephen, I saw first. All those in favour? That is unanimous. Thank you very much. We'll move on to item number 7, the city plan refresh. Mr. Flynn, again.
Thank you, Chair. This is the well, potentially the final stage in the development of the refreshed city plan. The last meeting, members reviewed a draft and recommended that for consultation. We consulted in a specific way by writing directly to known interested parties and stakeholders. As mentioned in the report, we wrote to, on paragraph 2.3, we wrote to 83 stakeholders and requested views and comments across 69 organisations across the committee. Full list of those is provided at the appendix for interest, and received altogether 44 responses, which was a very healthy response rate, particularly as I think some of those that we contacted were not directly in Worcester or directly related and necessarily very close to it. For a lot of those, 25 or so were fairly straightforward, simple comments saying, yes, it's good, or it's not good, or without any specific comments at all. But we received 2 or 3 detailed emails, particularly from the Cathedral and the University and the Canals and Rivers Trust, which set out a number of interesting questions about how we might nuance things slightly differently. And so I've incorporated into the final version of the report, and just for members' benefit, just to be very clear, there were comments around inclusiveness and the city is being welcoming. So I incorporated amendments into the introduction around the welcoming and inclusive community spirit of Worcester. There was emphasis on young people, and having appointed a young person's champion, that played into some of our own concerns. So there is a new outcome under the first theme, which is increased opportunities for young people to play, develop, participate, and gain a high quality education. So we've tried to emphasize that rather more. And we've also incorporated some commentary around some of the new developments to draw attention to those, and to cement that idea that we're progressing on this government-funded capital investment. And then finally, there were some additional mentions in the 4th objective, the heritage city with the 21st century culture, including the cathedral and its historical context and its location and its support for the rest of the city. So those are the relatively small changes, but they are important to our stakeholders, and we've tried to incorporate them. The other noticeable change, of course, is it's now a city plan for 2022 to 27, whereas it was 21 to 26, but where we are in the timetable now, it'll be published at the February Council, so therefore it really will begin from April 2022. So if members are content to take that forward, and then we'll take it through to Council for adoption in February.
Thank you, Shane. And can I start by thanking you personally for the work you've done on pulling this together. It has been a big piece of work, and I really do appreciate it. I'm sure members collectively do. Thank you for your contribution to doing this. We have debated, we've seen this before, and we've had a discussion. It is, again, and I'm delighted to say, I don't know how many other councils in the country have a all-party agreed plan for their city. I think we're fairly unique in doing it, and I'm really pleased that we were able to do that again. Any specific points that people want to raise? I saw Joe first this time.
Thank you.
And Jabber and then Steve.
I do notice that Worcester Play Council is not one of the consultees. I just wondered if it's too late to actually ask them for any comments that they would like to make, because there are references to play under number 3, a healthy and active city. It is very healthy for young people to have play opportunities, and Worcester Play Council is a stakeholder in this city and plays a very important role. So even though the consultation period has finished, I wonder if it might be possible to write to them and ask them if they have any comment to make.
Joe, I think just I mean, we are being asked tonight to recommend, to recommend the final draft to council. So I'm not sure whether going out to the Plague Council now, how we would necessarily square that. But I think it's a fair point about engaging them, maybe acknowledging they seem to have been missed out of that and asking for any views on further iterations of the plan, I guess, in any way in which we could implement some of our aims to meet, make sure that they're in alignment with them. I just think if we're approving it tonight, we can't then amend it. Well, we could amend it at council, but it would need to. It would go from as a recommendation from PNR tonight. So, Janie, would you be happy if we wrote out to them, saw if there were any final views, and that could come forward to council, I guess, Joe, even if we do approve it tonight?
Yeah, I would be very happy with that. I don't wish to hold up the progress of this plan, but I just think that they are a stakeholder in the city, and things that they have to say may be of importance.
Yeah, happy to do that. Councillor Revs next, and then Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm obviously really pleased with the progress of the plan, and it covers a lot of areas previously that I hadn't thought about. So congratulations that have been involved in producing this across the board. There's 2 points to note, really. One, through obviously the chair of the communities and myself, we're in the process of exploring an asset-based community development model, which may have a fundamental impact on some of the plan. So the question was, in terms of ratification, if we at a future date, would, in terms of changing some of the wording or additions to this plan, would that be possible? And the second part of the question is, obviously, we're also doing currently a cultural strategy review at the moment, which a report will be coming in. How would that feed into the overall arching? Should we not wait till that's completed, till this goes?
Would you like to have a go at some of those, Jane, and review on some of the?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, just in terms of the second one, there were a range of supplementary documents supporting plans for the previous city plan. They were all listed at the end, some of which were taken forward fully, some of which weren't taken forward at all, some of the way. And I'd been in the practice of noting in the annual updates on the state of the city reports where we were with those. But because that was it wasn't a terribly effective process, I determined at this time that we wouldn't include those, but we would recognise within the plan that it is an overarching document and there are a whole series of things which fed into them. So all we need to do is, rather, it's a downward process, is recognise the themes of the city plan and look to see how those supporting strategies and policies into that. So they should all be collected together, that's the intention, and when we do our annual process, we'll look at where we are in the overall plan and how that should come through. In terms of the first, sorry, remind me, Jeff.
It was the ABCD, asset-based community development, and too late to put that in. I mean, I would argue that whilst it might not be in the plan, but we may adopt it. I mean, this is not the only document that we use to guide our work. So if ultimately the Communities Committee wishes to recommend some aspects of that to the council, then even if it's not explicitly listed in here, we could do so. Yeah, I'm going to, is it coming to PED? Oh, it's coming to PED, is it? All right. Well, whichever committee it is, it will go to. And I will let Councillor Stanley come in here if he wishes.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, I acknowledge the point you've just made about, and other colleagues have made about the necessity of hopefully endorsing this evening and then going to council in February. The ABCD process that Councillor Reyes and I both participated in, a very informative afternoon, was something that I think certainly aspects of it should be very much open for discussion, and we can filter them in at whatever appropriate time we decide to. So I'm with him on that. I think we saw a lot there that we can embrace, but certainly at which point we then introduce those things or not into the way we do our business will be a matter for subsequent committees to decide.
Fine. Councillor McKay.
Yep, thank you, Chair. Just want to say thank you for making those adjustments to the city plan. I think it takes on board that we do listen to the comments that are made during the course of these reports, particularly as it relates to the issue concerning the cathedral that is now got a mention in there, and the fact that it plays such a pertinent role within this city. So when the comment comes from the pulpit as well, I think we've done a good job. So thank you very much indeed.
Are you trying to get in with somebody, Councillor McKay? Somebody upstairs? Okay. Yes, you can.
Sorry, just to come back on an earlier point in terms of incorporating new comments as we go, we are proposing an annual summit, and the idea of that is it takes on new ideas and further iterations of the work beyond that. And it's been the practice so far to, when we've got new changes, new indicators come to light, we bring those into play as well. So each year we report. There are opportunities to change the work and things that are guided by the city plan.
If there are no further comments, can I put that to the vote then, that we recommend the plan to full council for adoption? All those agreed? In favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you very much. We'll move on then to item number 8, the termination of the Revs and Bens management contract. Doing all the work tonight. Again, thank you.
What else would I do? This is a very interesting future next piece of work around. I mentioned at the previous committee that Civica have given us notice that they intend not to renew their involvement in the management of the contract and want to terminate early by December 2003. So we have a limited amount of time, but sufficient time to make some choices about what we want to do with that. There are 3 broad responses, really. One is that we could find another provider. Second is that we could revert to a shared service, or thirdly, that we could take the service back in-house directly. There might be other variations, but those are the main ones. And I'll just go through them briefly and underline why I've reached the proposed recommendation there. In respect of other providers, there are a limited number of providers, Civica, Liberata, Meritech, a few others, and they are not terribly active in the market at the moment. Since universal credit was introduced, this has been seen as a management of a decline of a service around. So those who were traditionally keen to take on these services and expand and grow are withdrawing as a approach. So if we were to go out to market, and we've recently gone out to market for some fairly high profile audit work and got no responses whatsoever. So I'm not convinced that we would get something which was. In respect of the third, bringing the service directly back in-house, it is, I mentioned earlier that there are some things in the pipeline which will bring in efficiencies for us, and this is one of them. I've no doubt that we will see efficiencies as a result of the implementation of the contract as it stands. But if we were to bring it back into house, I think we lose quite a lot of those. It's because we would need to appoint specific individuals to take on the key roles there, rather than, as they are at the moment, shared across three authorities. And the other dimension to this is the original contract requires is actually a partnership between the council. So it's not a question of withdrawing from Civica, it would be a question of withdrawing from the partnership, and there would be a legacy payment, a liability to the other partners that we expect to be quantified. So the second option, which is to return to the shared service, is the simplest. Simply the existing staff would cheaply back into the shared service, where many of them were cheaply across in the first place. And they would continue in situ, presumably, that's to be in whichever where they are based. And then there would be an arrangement akin to what was there previously. I've had a look back at the early documents, which predate me, of course. And there are some indications there about how apportionments were made in terms of the savings which were achieved. we could draw on in terms of recognising what contribution each partner would need to make to this. But there needs to be a clear and level-headed and sensible discussion about we would pay for the. That will be the subject of a future report. For the moment, I'm just seeking agreement that we go ahead, accept Civica or bolt back to a shared service time being until we're clear about what that actually
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson this time.
I was actually the cabinet member when this shared service was actually started, and it certainly has served. It's has been useful and has served its purpose, but I do think it's probably now about time to, as we can see, it served its purpose, and now it's perhaps it will be shared within the three councils in-house. Also on a bit of scale as well.
Gregson.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, the whole process of shared services that we went through some years ago in order to try and reduce overheads to make improvements and efficiencies to certain areas of local government delivery across Worcestershire was somewhat traumatic, and there have been mixed benefits from the different shared service arrangements that we went into. I think there's also been mixed experiences of those councils who've hosted those services, and in some cases we're still experiencing some of those issues and concerns about the way in which existing and continuing shared services operate. I think this particular one, though, is a really good example of the way in which the private sector tried to intervene in the public sector and its dealings with delivering housing benefits and universal credit, in the hope that it would make a profit. We've seen over the last couple of years, really, across, not only in Worcestershire, but across the country, of a number of these sorts of affairs going back in-house local councils, HR, finance, IT, property, Revs and Bens, admin between police services, all these things that were touted as being the great, wonderful way forward for local government services for us to save money, and now coming back in-house because the shareholders of these companies no longer are making a profit out of the misfortune, in many cases, of the members of society. So I think that, it demonstrates quite clearly that local government and public services in general are the way forward in terms of delivering these sorts of services. And this hokey-cokey of 2p and stuff, which affects staff so awfully in terms of just in terms of their anxiety and their position and their employment situation, even if they end up on the same terms and conditions at the end of it, the process is painful. I really hope that we've seen the last of this kind of private initiative into local authorities. We know what we can do it well, we can share service, we can be efficient and improve ourselves, but we don't force the money as a result of that into the pockets of private shareholders who have really no interest in the business whatsoever. So I'm pleased to see the way in which this is going and fully support the recommendation.
Councillor Lamb.
Thank you very much. I think
summed it up really, but I mean, it was a genuine question to ask, you know, have Civica given any reason? Are they required to give any reason? Other than the sort of hypothesis already just articulated just there, but have Civica given any reason why they've terminated the contract? And they've obviously terminated it early. Is this normal? Is this a normal way in which they operate?
Through you, Chair, not specifically, no. I mean, it is profitable for them. They have stated that. They regarded it as a fairly sort of flagship operation. They applied for and shortlisted for an award for it a couple of years ago. All they've said is that they are withdrawing from these contracts. They've made a strategic decision and they know manage service.
Councillor Stafford.
Thank you, Chair. Just a couple of questions. Will the decline in this revenues and benefits workload continue to decline as it has been due to universal credit, and how would that be factored into a future service? And then the second question is, would investment in an IT platform be required? So would there be some kind of sort of IT sort of risk? And the third question is, we looked into what the other three district councils in Worcestershire do to provide their equivalent service. If there's any opportunity there.
Through you, Chair. So the first, yes, there is a continuing decline in benefit clients numbers, but you will reach a point where that will stabilise before very long, because remember 50% of the claimants aren't included in the non-working age claimants remaining on housing benefits. So those aren't. It's difficult to say quite how far we've got to in that process. But what is that sort of getting into too much of the details? It's evident that the staffing base has stripped out, has gone ahead of the decline in the numbers, and we're seeing that from the fact that we've been reporting to committee that there is a lengthy delay in processing time, and that's as a result of potentially understaffed. So they've been, we might see that as projecting a continued decline, voting for that. So there will be an impact. It's difficult to quantify at this stage, say quite how far we are with that, but that will need to be taken into account in the later report when we look at the detail. In terms of investment in IT platform, no, the Civica are just going through the process of changing the IT platform because the capital is very outdated and there's long needed replacing. So that's part of work which is currently ongoing. So that will be completed well before we end the contract. But if we were to remove, move away from the shared service partnership, we would then have to disaggregate that data and we would then have to create an IT system of our own. So that's partly why it would be, we wouldn't get the returns to scale if we did it fully in-house. And in terms of the other three districts, I've had outline conversations with them. They manage their own systems. It's all entirely in-house. So the opportunity for a shared service across Worcestershire or to broaden this partnership or to go in a different route remains. That's something that we could do, but there are no other managed services.
Councillor Alcott.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I'm just really pleased to see this recommendation. I think it will work really well, and I think
Thank you. I just wanted a couple of words on this one. There's a lot of, or a good part of what Councillor Gregson said that I agree with, but my own view is, at the end of the day, what matters is what works. It shouldn't be about structures. Sometimes the private sector delivers quite well. Sometimes the public sector delivers best. Sometimes a voluntary sector option works quite well. And we've had a real mixed economy in Worcestershire. I have to say, in terms of engagement of the private sector, this Revs and Bends contract has been the best of all. It's worked well. It saved us money compared with council delivery in the old model. Bringing it back in may save us even more money. And sometimes this is change management recognises that these opportunities do create an opportunity to think again about them. So in some ways, it's a shame that this one is coming to an end, because I think it's worked. Some of the others have been less successful, and we have ourselves withdrawn from some of them because of not meeting our needs. And I do hope that we will be a proper commissioner of the replacement service. So if it is a shared service hosted by somebody else, I hope that we are the commissioner of what we want, and we don't end up getting a sort of standard cookie cutter approach to this service. If we want something specific or different, I hope that we commission those and hold them to that. But I think, personally, I think that your recommendation of a continuation of a shared service with the two partners in the south is a good one, and I'm happy to support it. Okay, we have a recommendation. It's to approve the return of the Revs and Bends to an in-house shared service. All those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thanks very much. I think you're going to get a rest here. Item number 9. Who is going to present this?
Sorry, Chair,
David?
Sadly, you're not going to get
I'm
a rest.
not. Oh, you are now the Director of Operations, Homes and Communities as well?
Standing in.
Okay. Goodness shame.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, you'll get to listen to somebody else in a minute, I promise. This is one that straddles both communities and finance. So it's a process. It's quite detailed, this report. It's quite a detailed discussion, but it's important to understand what we're trying to do here. This has been quite a lengthy process. It's an iterative one, and we're trying to get to a position where our grants to individual bodies is in a formal and transparent state, so that everyone understands who we're giving money to, how much we're giving, why we're giving it, how long we're giving it for. That's the kind of goal that we're trying to work towards. So there are a set of recommendations which try to bring us a little bit further forward. We did a report 2 years ago to set this current process in place, and this really is a development of that. As things stand, in very broad terms, we have 3 sets of grants, don't we? We have large grants, which are over a certain value, over £15,000, and there are a set of those. We have a set of small grants, which a value of up to £2,000, and imaginatively titled every year, and it is part of their 5-year business plan. So when that comes to an end, we'll need to look again at whether or not that's the right amount. So it's not fixed, but that's the position at the moment, and we would look to say that's baseline funding for the next 5 years. In terms of the medium ones, the problem with those is you only need one medium grant and the entire pot's used up. So the proposal is to actually bring the small and medium pots together, to give a total of 74,165, and to raise the level of the small grants up to £5,000. So any organisation can bid following the current process. Those go through to a panel, which makes the decision whether to award the grant. And generally that means meeting certain criteria, but there is not a detailed service level agreement. There's a requirement to report back on what the money was spent on, but it's a fairly meant to be a low level, fairly not very bureaucratic process. Then outside of that, we have a number of grants which have been awarded for one reason or another. They've gone through committee, or there are officer decisions under delegated powers under a previous committee decision. And so those all have a time limit. They are drawn from reserves. It's important to note that none of these are within base budgets. They are drawn from specific reserves. Therefore, when that reserve is depleted, the grant will cease unless there is another decision to make another award in fullness of time. And in order to help us through that process, what I'm proposing is that we set aside £50,000 each year to enable us to make decisions about new grants as those come forward. And some of them could be funded from other pots, but there is a specific amount therefore set aside that would have to be drawn from reserves. But that would then, whenever an organisation came forward and said, could we get some financial support, there'd be somewhere we could go. At the moment, we have one that we agreed at the outturn stage, was 50,000 for arts and cultural developments, things like that. So it's that sort of thing, but committing now to continuing to do that year on year. There are a number of other organisations which we have supported in the past. I've listed quite a few of those. So we would expect that those organisations potentially come back and seek support. So just to return to the recommendations, then to summarise, just to note those allocations that we've done, and we're expecting all of those grants to be committed this year. To change the small and medium grants process so that we've got, to confirm the large grants and to do those over a 5-year period, to amend the process for small and medium grants to increase the pot, to up the limit to £5,000. One specific one is to approve an annual allocation from that small grant fund to Worcester Arts Council. We had a grant to Worcester Arts Council, then we decided that they should, all their members should bid to the small grants pot. That didn't work very well. So this year we returned to giving them an overall fund to distribute to smaller organisations, and we're proposing that that becomes fixed as an approach, and to allocate this request of £50,000 from the budget on an annual basis to support one-off requests for grant support. Warwick's joined us, so if there are detailed questions which I'm unable to answer, I can defer to him, but if there are any questions, then we're happy to try and answer them between us. Thank you.
David Blake would like to say something.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yes, with regards to the Worcester Festival, I've been in conversation with the organisers with regards to an increase on the level you see in front of you, the 21,175. The festival organisers have not had more than an inflation increase for 15 years. It's, as you all know better than most, it's tight out there. I am proposing an amendment to that budget allocation by an increase of £2,000. In terms of budget, as Shane has already said, we have an allocation for festivals and arts, so there is the money available. It does not present any budget pressure for us. So my proposal is to increase the Worcester Festival annual allocation by £2,000. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I think technically you're just recommending. I don't think much as I love the managing director. Yeah, much as I love the managing director, I think it's only members that can actually move.
It's a recommendation.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Councillor Gregson wants to come in.
I just wonder if I could clarify that position then. Does that mean that the one-off grants amount that paragraph 4 is now 48,000 rather than 50?
I think that would remain at 50,000. It was just 2K on that one action, but there would still be a 50 grand pot in addition to that. So there'll be a.
So where was this £2 grand coming from?
On a £30 million budget, I'm sure the Director of Finance will find our £2,000 if that's the will of the council, I guess, to do so. Councillor Mitchell, and then Councillor Stanley.
Thank you, Chair. When you look at this in a whole, it's over £250,000 we're giving out. I'm not sure whether we promote this enough to the the people of Worcester understand that some of these fantastic activities that can take place, whether it be Worcester Theatre, Worcester Wheels or the festival or the 10K run, are only able to take place because the council support that. And I'd like to see what our marketing plan for this is, or what we intend to do to make people aware. I mean, I never see it in the Worcester News. I don't see it on our website as a front headline, or even at the events. Do we get a big Worcester banner saying Worcester? So I'd like to see us get some payback is the wrong term, some recognition, and Worcester residents understand that these events only happen because they're supported by the council.
I'm going to ask Warwick, as he's joined us, Warwick, hopefully you were able to hear Chris Mitchell's comment, which is, given how much the council gives to these different organisations, is there a plan to make sure that the public know that the council's doing this, I guess, or?
Yes, there is a requirement for organisers to acknowledge the City Council's investment and support, and obviously with our funding comes various requirements and challenges on targets. So there's an element of us benefiting directly and indirectly from our awards. I think there's a great opportunity with the cultural strategy to make it more obvious, the length and breadth of our funding. But certainly, councillors, we can certainly look to make sure that our marketing with our comms team improves, using City Life and other mediums to highlight obviously what we're promoting and supporting.
Thank you. Councillor Stanley next.
Chair, thank you. First of all, I'd like to express my thanks to all the staff who work on grants. We asked a number of questions of them a few years ago, first of all via a task and finish group and then through the committee. And we've introduced quite a bit of rigour into the system, which was necessary. The adjustments and amendments that are being proposed here to give the system more fluidity are, in my judgment, perfectly sound. I mean, ultimately, these grants provide funds for some of the most vulnerable people in our city, but also allow us to demonstrate that this is a vibrant city where people should come and visit, where residents have lots to get involved with. And quite frankly, these are hugely important pots of money that we spend on behalf of the citizens of Worcester. So I'd endorse it, and I hope that particularly, we had a conversation a year or so ago about Worcester Arts Council. On reflection, changes have been made there. I support that. I think, ultimately, as anything evolves, there should be room for sensible manoeuvring where necessary. But overall, I think the direction of travel for grants in this city has been a positive one over the last few years. And as I say, I'd commend the report to everyone.
Thank you. Councillor Hodges.
Sensible manoeuvring. I'm just looking at all the organisations that we used to fund and support in 4.4 and that we don't now support. And I make no apologies for coming back to Worcester Play Council again, which is an organisation that we no longer fund. Can I just check that the 50,000 that's being offered here for organisations to apply for funding from is in addition to the small grant money of 56,635 and the medium grant money of 17,530. So if it is on top of that, I presume that means that those organisations that we no longer support, like Worcester Play Council, like Oasis Warndon Community Hub, can apply for funding from that 50,000, and that there will be clear criteria, because some of these, well, probably all of them, are still continuing the good work that they've been doing, but continuing with, in some cases, great difficulties because they have no assured funding. We've decided to fund Worcester Arts Council again, I think because you said it wasn't, the process of application wasn't working out. But there are organisations here, do they realise what they have to do? And is that 50,000, as I said, on top of the money that's for medium and small grants?
Question first.
Through you, Chair. Yes, it is on top of the existing grant awards. There are no set criteria because what we're trying to capture here is those things which come to my desk during the course of the year, and we say, well, we've received an interesting application. It's something we'd like to support. Where can we fund that from? And I spend some time trying to find an appropriate reserve. Not always successfully, and have to wait till the outturn stage. The purpose of this 50,000 is to try and to solve that problem. Say, well, there is a bit of funding there that we can go to when we receive applications. So we weren't, and obviously members will have a decision about this. It wasn't my intention that we would advertise that, but that reserve would be available in the event that we got applications. We would know, we would have somewhere to turn to. It would be subject to a committee approval. The reserve would remain the remit of the Policy and Resources Committee, therefore it will be subject to a committee approval to release for the application.
And I also mentioned that I'm a trustee of WCT because it has actually been mentioned in the report and I didn't notice it.
Noted, Joe. Can I just clarify though, that those organisations listed in table 2, they get, at the moment, they're one-off grants that we've, some of them are more than once, but there's a fixed period of time. That isn't to say that this council isn't going to fund these in the future, but they are for future decisions for policy and resources. So I wouldn't want anybody to run away or be confused to say that we're not going to be supporting the Worcester Food Bank or the Arts Council or others, but those will be subject to further decisions of P&R and the council as appropriate.
And just to add, for example, Worcester Food Bank is funded from the Hardship Fund, so they won't necessarily come from. We'll know that there is a resource there should we need.
Councillor Gregson.
Sorry to harp on, Chair, but the 50,000 pot, which is we've previously agreed was in order to support the cultural strategy primarily, is for art and cultural events. So the medium grants, which is now 74,000, would be the area in which non-cultural organisations might be aimed at.
Through you, Chair. So there's perhaps needs some refinement to the wording. That wasn't my intention. What I was comparing it to, the fact that we had a £50,000 agreed an amount specifically for arts and culture. The intention here is just to have a general £50,000 be applicable to organisations to apply for, on top of the small and medium grants, which are up to £5,000. So if the organisation were looking for more than that, then that's one of the routes that we might go down. But it wasn't designed to be specifically for arts and culture, but for more widely.
So just
apologies if I've misled the
committee. So we're pulling back a bit from what we said before on that.
I'm clarifying the wording, Chair, through you. The intention is that £50,000 grant is available for applications. That's specifying what type of applications they might. So it's not specifically, in my mind, it wasn't specifically designed for arts and culture, but if obviously members want to make those place limitations on that funding,
that's what I was like, to be fair, that's what's outlined in paragraph 4.5.
4.5.
Forgive me, Chair. Yeah. I think I used the phrase arts and culture and similar.
Okay.
So it was intended to be, but perhaps that wording needs to be clarified.
Does that clarify the situation? Councillor Hodges, yes.
Thank you. So it's 50,000 for arts and culture, and then there's an additional 50,000 for other things other than arts and culture, or it could include arts and culture if you wanted to.
We'll have another go. The £50,000 for arts and culture was for this year. It was agreed at the outturn stage and it's available until it's used up.
It's a one-off.
And that's a one-off reserve. What I'm proposing is a reserve set aside, which is annually increased. Whatever's left in it will be increased back to £50,000, and that will be available for grants, whatever purpose.
Which
Okay.
could include arts and culture.
Which could, yes.
Okay. Yes, they're separate
Separate
amounts, yeah,
amounts.
we know that. Yeah. One's a, what? Guys,
No, that's in addition to the 74.
I will be asking and testing you later on these, so I hope you're following clearly. Okay, with those questions answered, are we happy to approve this? All those in favour? Well, sorry, Jabba, what was the? Oh, the £2,000. Yes, sorry, that will. Sorry for clarification. 2,000 extra for Worcester Festival. Yep, as recommended. That is unanimous. I think Adrian's. Yeah. Just about. Yeah. Okay. Fine. That's okay. Semi-raised hand. Right. Okay. We'll move on to item 10, the town's investment plan, 7 Centre for Health and Wellbeing. I'm sure you are definitely having a break now because David's here. So, David Sutton, it's your moment.
Thank you, Chair. So, members of the committee will remember approving our town investment plan back in January of this year. And going through the process over the summer, we received the heads of terms from government and submitted project confirmation tables, which brought us to 5 projects within the town investment plan, with grant funding totaling £19.6 million, at 2.3 within the report. And the next stage required is a preparation of Treasury Green Book compliant and proportionate business cases for each project. Those need to be signed off by the council, and this committee is the accountable body. And the council has engaged Mott MacDonald consultants to write the business cases and summary documents with us, working with the respective project leads and other officers and partners. And members will see we're joined by 2 colleagues, as Victoria Hurst and Simon Donlan from Mott MacDonald are with us by video link, and they've led the team that have described this particular document and working with us on the other 4 business cases. So this report presents the first business case, which is for the 7 Centre for Health and Wellbeing. That's a new training facility for healthcare and medical professionals at the University of Worcester. And members, I'm sure, are aware that that will be occupying a redeveloped Berrers House, the former home of the Worcester News. But whilst the approval of business cases is a matter for the council as the accountable body, a prescribed summary document for each business case is also required to be submitted to government to trigger release of the funding for each project. Appended to the report, Appendix 1 is the 5-case business case for this project, and that confirms the feasibility, deliverability and the value for money of this project. This business case received unanimous support from the town board, which met on the 2nd of December. The proposals are unchanged from those that were approved by the committee in the town investment plan and submitted project confirmation documents. There's a contribution from the town's fund of £2.5 million as part of an overall project budget of £20 million. And what the town investment plan funding will enable is delivery of an enhanced capacity and the best practice healthcare learning facility, where the whole range of professions, of medical professions and healthcare professions, train together, simulating the workplace environment, which is something that's fairly new in this area, and I think it's just being used in one other university in the country at the moment. And the wider project will deliver 1,500 new learners per annum and 100 new jobs for the city. But the business case has completed a value for money assessment of the town's funding, which comprises of additional students which will be able to graduate from the 7 Centre due to the increased capacity. The figures are there before you around the benefit cost ratio, which is a high one for the town's fund contribution, and net present social value over a 30-year nominal life of the project. So, subject to approval by the committee tonight, the summary document in Appendix 2 will be submitted to government, and that will trigger the release of the relevant grant funding. just ask you to note that payment of the grant to the university will be subject to an appropriate due diligence to confirm the other funding sources and contractual commitments in place, as we would with any other significant grant. And this will lead us to drawing up and entering into a funding agreement with the university. And that will specify that payment from the council to the university will depend upon evidence of expenditure, and it will specify the outputs to be delivered. Members will also recall part of this project will enable public access to amenities, including cafe and toilet facilities on the university campus, which will support the Riverside Park. The officers will proceed to develop the remaining business cases and proceed with the other 4 projects and bring those forward to the committee in due course, utilising the respective grant funding as is detailed in this report. Section 310, for members' information, preparation of business cases to date has been supported by capacity grant funding from government and partner contributions relative to each project. We've recently received an advance of 5% of the total of 19.6 million. This is to support development and delivery of the projects, and that will be utilised to fund any further work that's required, such as site surveys, further feasibility studies and design work, which is required to support the development of the remaining business cases. And that hasn't been required in the case of the Severn Centre for Health and Wellbeing, as those pieces of work were well advanced by the university. Just to note that the alternative options to be considered, the proposals in the report, they've been developed at some length actually over the past 18 months or so, through the development of the town investment plan. There are a range of alternative options in the business case. The option before you is the best option in terms of strategic fit and value for money. So I'd draw the committee's attention to the 3 recommendations at the head of the report. That I would ask the committee to support the business case and approve the summary document for submission, authorise relevant officers to undertake the further due diligence work and enter into the funding agreement with the university, and also to approve the use of grant funding as detailed in the report for further development and delivery of the remaining projects within the town investment plan. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you, David. I should, I think, declare that I am a member of the Towns Fund Board, so I can record that I'm a council nominee on that, as is David Blake and Chris Mitchell. So I guess those should be recorded as interests. I just wanted to say this has of course been to the Towns Investment Board, who approved it at its meeting last week, and then it has obviously, they're recommending it for our adoption here. So I have Lucy first, and then Joe, and then Louis. Lucy.
For clarification, the project costs and everything else, we're not, council isn't bearing it, it's as part of the Towns Fund.
On this one, David will give us, but there is match funding in elements of all of the proposals. So other people are paying a contribution towards the project. But on this one, David, do you want to say anything?
Through you, Chair, I believe the question was regarding the cricket centre.
No,
I didn't hear that correctly. I'm apologies.
It was. Do you want to repeat it, Lucy? Project management.
Project management.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for mishearing that. So the Towns Fund contribution to the council is £2.5 million. That will include revenue costs of project delivery, as you would with any other capital project. So some of those costs will be capitalised within that £2.5 million. And clearly it's a 20 million project, so the university also will be actually delivering the project. Okay, Councillor Hodges next.
I just wanted to say what a fabulous project this is. And I feel really proud to be part with the university of creating this centre, which I think is going to be, I think, David said that it's one of two in the country. And I just think that it's a wonderful thing that's come to Worcester, and it's great to be partnering with the university. So great stuff. I think this is a really good use of that part of the town's fund money.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Stephen.
Yes, I agree that this is a fantastic project and will really support investment in the city, jobs and training. But obviously one of the important things of this committee is to scrutinise decisions to go forward with things. And one of the things I would like to just get a bit more clarification on is in the report, there is a section which asks us to consider the social, environmental and economic implications. So obviously we have declared a climate emergency, and we obviously need to play our part in reducing carbon emissions. This is obviously going to be quite a big building and essentially a big user of energy. So I think we should, as a matter of course, ask the question of what measures have been planned in terms of the building design use to minimise carbon emissions, particularly as we need to start working on all new infrastructure to be carbon neutral as we design and build new buildings for the future.
Chair, if I can, and thanks, Councillor Stephen. The planning permission for this particular project actually has done quite a detailed assessment on energy usage for the building. I don't believe that the final energy source has been decided upon yet, but certainly minimal carbon looked at. University does have a strong track record. Zero carbon. So I can't give any form of detail on that tonight, but it is something on the agenda.
I just supplement on that. This is a question that we've probably not asked the question enough of projects in the past. So we did have an environmental meeting with Roof Coral strategy. One of the things we did discuss in that meeting was routinely now we will be asking this question. It's really sort of, I'm going to put a marker down that in future, what I'd like to see more things in the report about the environmental aspect, the energy usage of big capital investments like this. So this is a great project, but I just want to ask for in the future that we see a little bit more detail.
Councillor Stafford and Councillor Grigson after that. So Councillor Stafford now.
Thank you, Chair. Just been looking at the risk management side of the project, and obviously there's some of the risk has been passed on to the construction partner, but there's also £1.4 million worth of contingency separate to that, which obviously seems quite a healthy and prudent amount. So my question really is if the contingency isn't used, which hopefully it won't be, how is that leftover apportioned? And likewise, if there were to be unexpected issues arising and it does go above budget, again, where would the risk lie for any additional costs?
Yeah, there is a reasonably large contingency in there. I shall do my best to give you an answer. I may refer to my McDonald colleagues if we get into a little bit more detail. Certainly, cost inflation is a risk that we were very aware of in developing this, and the university are very aware of. So there's a decent sum in there to cover cost inflation. Second question: if the contingency proves to be more than enough or not enough, the City Council has £2.5 million through the Towns Fund to commit to this project. We don't have any more to commit to the project, and the funding agreement will be very clear with the university that actually that's our contribution. There will be no more. Funding agreement will actually deal with that risk, so we're very clear that we need to manage the risk to the council of the project not completing and us having passed over the grant funding. So funding agreement will deal with that risk for us. It's the first part of your question about what if the contingency isn't required. That's something I'll back to you with now.
Councillor Gregson.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with the approach being taken on this particular document. I haven't got a problem with that. I think there might be a typo on page 50 of the overall case that might want to just review. My question really was about Appendix 2, which just raises the issue of the other 4 business cases. And I just wondered if, given that you're planning on 2 coming, presumably 2 to come to February P&R and 2 to come to March P&R, which is right up against the deadline of the end of the submission date. Are we confident that those are going to be in place? I mean, I wasn't totally sure why we was heading into March when my understanding was that the submission of summary documents has to be in by mid-January.
Mr. Sutton.
Our long stop date is 10 months from project confirmation. So we actually do have until June in order to submit the final summary document, summary of the business cases. We've targeted February and March. All of these projects are live and under development. So colleagues at Mark McDonald and myself and partners are monitoring that programme very closely. We're intending to bring them for March. I suspect one of the larger projects may actually be reprogrammed and come a little bit late. But it will be before the deadline. The Policy and Resources Committee, I believe, on the 24th or the 25th of May.
Councillor Revs.
Yeah, 2 points through you, Chair. One, it says accessibility. The design will not be inclusive to all. Can you clarify what part of this design won't be inclusive to all? The second question is, Chair, I think during the initial stages of the Town Investment Board, and especially this project, there was a requirement that we kind of insisted with the university that local people get the chance to get on these courses, maybe at a subsidised rate, but preference should be given to the local population in terms of access, and everything should be done in terms of making it as easy as possible for them to access these courses. I don't see any mention of that in there in this document regarding that, except that the local population will benefit through the training via GPs regarding that. So we can have some clarification regarding that. And thirdly, I think I picked up something about the cricket centre. Surely that's not part of this document, right?
No. Last one first, that's not part of this proposal. Okay, David, the other 2 points, can you help with those?
Yes, you, Chair. Apologies, Councillor, could you put me to the line you were talking about accessibility? Like it might be a typo. Is that within the report or the business case? Within the risk register, so that's one of the risks that's been identified, and then the mitigations and the measures to deal with that project. I don't have it right in front of me at the moment. Are that it has been checked and consulted with as part of the design. So it's something that's sort of has been very, very high up on the register. That's the accessibility. It will be a fully accessible building. So your second question, Chair, if I may, regarding local people's access to the courses. All the courses will, of course, be open, as university courses are open generally to the general population. We have had some discussions with the university on access for local people and how we can facilitate that and do some outreach work. Members, you will be aware that there's another project within the town investment plan which is around community skills, much lower level skills, but we would look to create a pathway, which may take a period of time, but to create that pathway through so that local people will end up going to this centre.
If that's all the questions asked, we are asked to support the business case and approve the summary document for submission to the department, to authorise the corporate director to undertake further due diligence and complete the appropriate funding agreement with the university, and to approve the use of grant funding for the development and delivery of town investment plan as detailed within the report. Can I move that? All those in favour? I think that's unanimous again. Thank you very much. Item 11, the Local Government Boundary Commission for England. Who is taking this? Sian is with us virtually, is she? Let's see if we can. Through the miracle of technology. Hi, Sian. Good evening. Can you hear us?
Good evening, everybody.
You are live. So over to you to present on this one, I believe.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to put on the Policy and Resources Committee agenda and work programme for next year the work of the Boundary Commission review. Members will be aware, because we've had the benefit of a briefing session with the Local Government Boundary Commission in the autumn, that it is time for a periodic review of Worcester City Council's electoral boundaries. That's just a product of the amount of time that has passed since our boundaries were last reviewed. Members will also be aware that the Boundary Commission is an independent body established in statute to have a thoroughly independent and transparent look at local government boundaries in each electoral division. So the process is something that the council will be very much involved in. We'll be a consultee, we're providing information and data, but this is a statutory process derived by the Boundary Commission. And we will be working alongside them and supporting them throughout next year and a little bit beyond. I'll assume that members have noted the timetable within the paper and recognise that it's quite a significant work programme ahead of us, albeit it'll be, I think, a little bit stop-start in terms of how it will progress. We're in the current information gathering preliminary stage. And members will note that we are scheduled to bring a report to this committee in February, addressing the Boundary Commission's first question, which is council size in terms of number of councillors. That's the first question that we're required to address and make submissions on. So what we're reporting tonight is effectively noting that first milestone in our programme of work. We'll bring a report to February Policy and Resources Committee, and if members are content to make some recommendations to full council, then those will go to full council on the 22nd of February. That's the first milestone in the Boundary Commission's work. After that, they will be very much engaged with the City of Worcester as well as the council. There'll be an open consultation on the next stage of the proposals. But to get us to February, the first step of work behind the scenes is a data gathering exercise about electoral size, population projections, how the council currently functions, how councillors are able to go about and effectively meet the needs of their communities in the size that we currently are. And we're able to make submissions about whether we think we're the right size, too big, too small. So those will be the matters that we will bring to you in February. The other point that the report recognises is that we have an opportunity but not a requirement to review our electoral timetable, the frequency at which we have elections. And the Boundary Commission have pointed out to the council, as they do every time they embark on a review, that if the council wished to review its electoral frequency, then it would be opportune to do that before they embark on the next stage of their work programme next year. Because if this council, for example, was to make a decision to move away from election by thirds into an all-out election once every 4 years, then that would inform the Boundary Commission's work and thinking about number of councillors required to represent each ward. So that is in the paper as an option for members to consider. If members wished to consider and consult on electoral frequency, then that is something that we would do ahead of February so that you could bring that information back and consider it at this meeting in February. But I would emphasise that that is an optional step for us. The mandatory work is to make submissions at the end of February about council size.
Sorry, I know members have had an opportunity to speak to the Commission staff directly. Leaders of groups have had the opportunity to meet with the lead commissioners who are undertaking the work, and those of us with long memories will know that this, what this was like 20 years ago or so when we just went through this. Tonight we're simply, as you say, noting the programme of work and authorising the Managing Director in consultation with the Chair and the 2 Vice Chairs to take reasonable steps to consult on the options for the cycle, being either by thirds or whole council, and to report back at the next meeting in February. So fairly simple recommendations on this one. Any questions? Councillor Mackay.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. When we had the briefing, Sean, in relation to this, we were told that if we do go to the 4 years election, which is the option that we can take up, then the number of councillors per ward could be 1, 2, 3, whatever. But if we looked at the doing it in thirds every 3 years, then it would be a 3 councillor ward. But I note at page 175 of the papers, what it says is actually in the second box down there, councils, they elect a third of their councillors in 3 years out of every 4. We try to make sure all their wards have 3 councillors. So it's not necessarily a given.
Through you, Chair, the Boundary Commission have made it very clear that they have a template and a methodology that they follow, but that it's my understanding from the presentations they've given to us that they will consider exceptional circumstances in their work and potentially consult twice if they think they're doing something that is particularly unusual. But they have very much steered us to say that their planning assumption would be if we elect by thirds, then it's 3 councillors per ward. That is very much their planning assumption.
I can add to that when I pushed them on it, they won't break natural geographies. So if an island or something like that was part of a local authority area and it required 1 or 2 councillors instead of 3, they clearly wouldn't lump it together with something on the mainland to try and create that. So, but it was that sort of exceptional situation rather than regular types. So yeah, their planning assumption is that it would all be 3-member wards. Councillor Gregson.
Sorry, just a quick clarification from Sean. I'm sure she's got the fingers at her fingertips, but I think we've got 15 wards at the moment. And out of those 15, how many are 2-member and how many are 3? About half and half, isn't it?
Councillor Gregson, I'm wishing I did have that data at my fingertips now.
5 and 10. So if we stay as we are in electoral cycles, we need to address 5 wards at the very least.
Again, the way the Boundary Commission present it back to us is to say that they're going to look at everything again. So that's that's what's said. For completeness, I should probably say, members, that it is possible to adopt a different electoral frequency as well. We always talk about election by thirds or all out, but I've been through the gov.uk information, and I've learned that 7 district councils elect every 2 years in halves. There's a magnificent 7 doing something different there. So when the recommendation says we will consult on all the options if that's what you agree that we should do.
Okay, I think we've probably got, it's a fairly simple thing that we're approving tonight of a long and complex process. So can I move it, the recommendations from the chair, and can I see all those in favour? That's unanimous again. Thank you very much. And thank you, Sean. We'll move on to item 12, the use of the managing director's urgency powers, which Mr. Flynn, you're doing this one as well. The managing director is not doing this one. So over to you.
Ever present. Thank you, Chair. This is in effect a noting report. We're noting the use of urgency powers, which have been decisions taken because of the urgency of the circumstances. The first is in respect of the business rates pool. The proposal was that we continue the pool as it was. We sought technical advice, as we always do. That recommended no change. All of the treasurers agreed that there should be no change, but we had to make a decision before the next relevant Policy and Resources Committee on the 16th of November. So that therefore we used urgency powers to approve and agree that in consultation with the leaders group on the 8th of October. The second is in respect of discretionary business grants funding. So this is the grants which we've been receiving from the government, the last of which must be defrayed by March 22. We've got around £155,000 left, although since then we've had a number of further applications, so that's now reduced to about 140. And rather than simply following the previously agreed recommendation of the committee was that if we had any left, we'd simply paid to those who'd already received some money, they would only have had about £500 each. So it was no real value. So we determined instead that we would try to allocate it to certain existing activities to support and enhance those, or to specify some new areas of support that we could give, all designed to help businesses locally, particularly small businesses, to recover from COVID. So more details of those are set out in Appendix A. And that was done in discussion with the leadership group at its previous meeting. And then finally, we received an allocation, or rather the county received an allocation of housing support grant funding recently, of which an amount was distributed to district councils. We received 336,000, and it's necessary to begin the process, because again, this has to be spent by 31st of March 2020, very quickly. So a number of proposals were put forward and discussed, the leader and deputy leader at the time, the urgency of so that was agreed. Those are set out in more detail in Appendix B. So these are decisions which have already been taken and are being implemented. Therefore, I'm asking committee simply to note the use of urgency.
Is that noted? Agreed? Agreed. Okay, I am not aware of any other urgent business, and therefore I'm going to call it a night. And can I just say, I hope everybody enjoyed it tonight. I think every member of the committee has spoken, most at least twice. We've agreed all of our things unanimously, and we have actually, but still scrutinised the decision. So I think it's been a really good example of us working together. So can I wish you all a happy Christmas, and see you in